have some questions for you. Hey, brave girl, how you do the things that you do?
Welcome to the Brave Talk Show. Brave women, bold topics, nothing is off the table. In today's episode, we are interviewing McKayla Julian, who's the founder of Pretty Tough Ladies. She's an abuse survivor and an advocate for abused women. And today we're going to be talking about how we can better support women who are abused. And I'm so excited to be able to talk with you today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here.
Let's just jump right into it because we're trying to do actually shorter episodes right now.
Yeah.
Let's start off with, what is abuse? Like, where do we draw the line between I got a kind of a jerk for a husband and, you know, we're being abused?
I mean, honestly, it's if you ever feel like you're uncomfortable, you're unsafe, and you voice this to your partner and they just completely disregard it and continue to behave that way, that's abuse. Like, that's not tolerable, you know? I do think that that's something that people struggle to understand with drawing the line, is that it's much more than just physical abuse. It's much more than just hateful speech. If you're uncomfortable, you feel unsafe, somebody's punched a wall, somebody's said something that, you know, not necessarily super hateful, but something that's uncomfortable, and you voice it to them, they don't change their behavior, that's abusive behavior.
That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. So with Pretty Tough Ladies, which is an organization that you founded a little while ago, right?
Yeah, a few months ago. Mm-hmm.
When you're helping women who've escaped abusive relationships, what are the typical experiences that they're having? Is it physical? Is it verbal? What kind of abuse are they facing?
I mean, it's all types of abuse. And once again, we do get asked that question too, is where is that line? Like, they oftentimes question if their feelings towards it are not valid. But if you're feeling unsafe, if you're feeling uncomfortable, it's valid. And so we do see all sorts of abuse.
I have a question. I guess my thing is, so how do you, because every story is going to be different,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And the way that you handle every situation is going to be different.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure you see similarity, you know, of how, you know. So how do you balance that? Because her story may not be your story.
Yeah.
And as you're helping these women, certain things can trigger. So where do you find that balance of helping each woman and making sure that they know that's their individual, you know, situation? Because it's hard sometimes to be like, well, so-and-so went to this too. So, and they were able to look at you over it.
Yeah,
and where
absolutely.
this woman's not able to get out of it still. So
Yeah.
I guess kind of like the balance, how do you handle that with the...
Yeah, well, and the biggest thing too is making sure that they're ready to leave and they're ready to do that for themselves, because if they're not ready, then nothing you do is going to encourage them to do that. You can support them. That's the biggest thing, is listening to them, supporting them, understanding where they're coming from. But a big thing that I did was trauma-informed trainings and stuff like that, because with that type of support, you can really support anybody that's going through abuse. But I think when it comes to specific situations, I mean, you do kind of have to treat each person differently depending on their situation. And some of them are not even ready to talk about it. And so you just don't even talk about it. You just support them and you listen to them. And if they're ready to talk about it, then you can be there for them. But every situation is absolutely different.
Yeah.
So.
Do you find that a lot of women have a stage of denial at first?
Absolutely.
That they weren't being abused, this wasn't abuse, it was a one-time thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Things like that?
Yeah.
What's some advice for someone who's maybe having thoughts in their heads like, man, that felt like verbal abuse or financial abuse or like gaslighting or even as blatant as physical violence? Like, what would you do for someone who's like, oh my gosh, am I being abused?
Yeah. I mean, I think you would still support them, still listen to them, maybe ask them to write down questions that they would have for themselves, like, do I feel safe? How did what this person did make me feel? Mm-hmm. And would I be okay with somebody doing this to my loved one, to my child? Like, that's a really big thing, because sometimes we can be excessively tolerant to poor behavior.
Right.
And so if you think about it in somebody else's shoes, like, would I be okay with somebody doing that to my child? Would I be okay with somebody doing that to my best friend, to my, mom, or like something like that? Because if that's your answer is like, no, absolutely not, then why would you tolerate it for yourself?
That's so actually interesting that was your answer as a professional and as someone who survived an abusive relationship, because I, as our followers know, I'm recently divorced, and I had similar thoughts, like, is certain behaviors happening in my relationship, like, is this abuse? And you kind of like, no, like, there's no way, I'm in a pretty good, loving marriage. But then I started questioning, like, I don't feel right about that. I didn't feel okay about that. And the thing that actually really switched for me was there was an incident that there was a physical altercation. And I immediately thought, like, I would never be okay with that happening to one of my daughters.
Absolutely.
That was abuse.
Yep.
And that actually was what triggered me into separating and leaving. And like, that was the moment when I was like, even if I can't justify all the other things that I thought were happening emotionally or whatever, like, that was now a landmark. Like, that was physical abuse, and like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also trusting yourself and asking yourself, like, is this something that, like, I would do to somebody? Like, you don't treat people that way. It's not okay. It's not okay behavior at all. And so I think it's great that you stood up for yourself and that you left that
but it
situation.
comes with a lot of guilt too, because then I'm like, am I just overreacting? Like, he's never hit me or punched me before. Like, this was like a one thing. You know what I mean? Like, I had so many thoughts of like, I don't know, like, he's a good person, he's a good guy, but like, there's still all these other things that I don't feel safe about and I'm not okay with. And so for those, like, in situations like this, like, I understand, like, it's very confusing, and you almost try to justify the better behavior.
Yeah, always. Well, that's what makes you stay, right? Because you think about, well, they did this and this, and this was good, and this was good times. Because I mean, I can even think back to my abusers, right? And think, oh, well, there was this good time and this good time. But that behavior totally overexceeds the good behavior. Like, that is behavior that's, for one, never going to change. It will only get worse. And you have to believe and understand that it can and will get worse, because that is absolutely what happens in every scenario. And sometimes it's oftentimes too late.
And I even told myself, just by like, let's say nothing ever happened again, because there was not physical abuse all the time. There was a one-time physical altercation. It scared the actual crap out of me. I was like such in shock. He obviously apologized, knew that it was not okay.
That's what they always
like, there
do,
was remorse and everything. And so I was like, okay, like, I don't think my husband is going to physically abuse me again. But let's say even if he never did, immediately the trust was gone.
Absolutely. And
I worked for a year to try to like get that back. Like, I just couldn't feel safe again. And for those who know me well, I have a personal history with my sexual assault. He's now serving 15 years to life. And that, for me, like, I couldn't do it anymore. Like, that was supposed to be my safe person, and it was gone. And so
and then
it's a long
that's
process.
why it's all forms of abuse is abuse, because and some people are like, okay, well, I'm just being emotionally abused. They haven't physically done it, or they only did it one time. That's one time too many. And even the emotional abuse is something that if it's wearing on your self-worth and you're like whittling down to this person that you never wanted to be, like, that person is not good for you. That person's toxic, and you need to get out of that situation.
So for you, when was it like you realized like my relationship was heading that way?
For me, almost immediately. It was within like the first 3 months. And actually, I had my bags packed ready to leave when I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. So, and then I was like, oh shit, like, I'm stuck. So I stayed for another like year and a half after that. But for me, I mean, he was yelling all the time, saying really hateful things, like wishing death upon me, like really crazy things. But it didn't get physical until his mom and sister passed away. And that was really traumatic for him. But once again, that was his excuse of having that poor behavior, because, you know, he went through something really traumatic. And so it made it okay for him to treat other people that way. That's when the physical abuse started. He actually assaulted me 2 days after I found out I was pregnant, and I sent him to jail. But he changed. He got better while he was in jail, so I took him back, and his behaviors never stopped. And my pivotal moment where I finally left was it took him almost killing me. So, right with our daughter next in the next room.
So that's the thing I think kind of want to talk about a little bit, because as you speaking, I think you hear, like, I work with women that goes through this all the time.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing, can you talk then the cycle of going back and why the going back, the change, and then that it's sometime in what we always tell a victim is gonna end 3 ways, right? You're dead, they're dead, or one of you in jail
or
in
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you talk more about that? Why that cycle?
Yeah, you know, it's different for everybody, and it's different reasonings for everybody, right? And for me, it was the broken family aspect. I grew up with a broken family. Like, my parents got divorced when I was young, and I mean, I am glad it happened because they were toxic for each other. But growing up in that childhood, like, I always thought it was okay. Like, I grew up thinking that type of hostility in a household was okay. And so I thought in my head, well, I don't want my kid to go through a broken family, to go through a broken home. But it was already broken. It was actually worse for her being in that household. But yeah, that's definitely
It's a very good point. That
Good
to
point
they
there.
think about it, like, you're staying together because you don't want a broken family, but your family
But you're in
is
a
already
broken
broken.
family.
right?
Yeah.
And you're modeling behavior that could put them in the future.
In danger.
So, you know, Robin, you drew a line very early in the sand. You took a little longer. I know some women who have entered one abusive relationship after another, and they're at the end going, why do I attract such jerks all the time?
Yeah.
What are some common traits that you see in women who tend to just get themselves into these types of relationships that they could maybe start working on, so that when they're putting the work into themselves, they can stop this cycle and finally be in a place where they have healthy relationships?
So I actually did go through 2 abusive relationships back to back. The first one was 4 years, the second one was 2 years, and you know, obviously that cut my time in half because I was like, I'm not going to tolerate this. And he actually, I vividly remember my last abuser saying, you gave your ex 4 years. Why are you only giving me 2? And I was like, because I've learned my lesson, and I learned that I'm not going to tolerate this. And but I found that a lot of that was excessively tolerating poor behavior with all aspects of my life, even just strangers. The way people would talk to me, I would be like, oh, okay, like, no, you know, like, whatever. But now I have gotten to a place where I don't allow poor behavior. If you're going to hurt me in any way or be negative in any way, I'm not going to tolerate it. But a big thing I had to work on with my self-esteem. And I think that's really big for everybody in an abusive relationship, because when you're in one, your self-esteem is already withered down so low that you feel like you can't get out and you feel like you can't do better. So I would say one of the biggest things that people need to work on would be their self-esteem, their inner work, their inner healing, and their inner trauma healing.
I would agree.
That's a big trait, is self-esteem. And then the excessive tolerance, the dependency, whether it's emotional or financially, because they're scared of never finding somebody that's going to love them again, right? But that's not love. What they're doing to you is not love. So you absolutely will find love in the right way, not that way.
I've seen where very powerful women, and I think that's the other thing we have to look at, because there are some women that may have the broken family and then the daddy issue that people call it sometimes, some kind of something that draw them to that. But I've seen where women have been super powerful in a job and have it together, but then meet this person and then ignore all those, red flags.
Well,
but you put boundaries down. That's what I say. Like,
years later,
but
because
like,
I tolerated small little things that weren't okay, that continued to build up, and then I was tolerating things that really weren't okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And then finally, I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Right.
And then I think it's just like when you see that, it's sad to see, because it's like they're really trying to get out at one point, but then you realize I had a really good friend that went to it, but like the excuses of how they just like. They stop having friends. They stop coming to stuff. They stop texting you.
Yep, they lose themselves.
And then you watch them literally, that person trying to be like, I'm the only one for you. I love you. I want to be with you. Like, I'm giving you everything. Yeah. But then to watch them go through that side, like, you can watch it, and then it's like you can't help them. Like you said, until that person is ready to get help.
Exactly.
Right. Well, because and so one thing with that I will say is showing your support is so important, and listening to them, because for me, I felt like I had nobody at the end, right? Because I had pushed everybody away. Well, it wasn't me, it was my abuser that withheld me from having those positive relationships in my life. But I wasn't alone. Like, at the end, everybody rallied around me and was like, we've been here the whole time. We weren't going anywhere the whole time. Like, we love you. We're here for you. And so I want everybody who's going through something like this to understand that there is love for them. There is support for them, whether it may feel like it or seem like it or not. And it is okay to leave.
On that, I do want to mention that if you go to family or friends and they're not supportive, go somewhere else so someone rings the bell. Because in my case, I confided this information to family members, and I actually got different. It was like, that was a one-time thing. He's not a bad guy. Stay, work through it, and that crushed me. I was like, okay, so it wasn't.
They weren't going
like,
through it. They don't understand.
No one thought this was a big enough deal. Like, I literally am destroyed inside. Like,
but that's toxic behavior. Like, people.
Well, that is too, and I've now learned the family members that I've confided in. Like, I have a lot of boundaries to them, and I don't have a relationship with some of them because I was like, that's the worst advice. Like, if my daughter came to me and said, hey, my husband did this, this, and this, like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And so I'm sure there are women out there who have told people, just like me, and they were like, it's not a big deal. It happened one time. He's not an abusive person.
It's so cool.
And it's okay.
Right.
And then I was like, it's absolutely not okay.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you say it right. Support is the number one thing. So how can people find your support that you have for these women that are going through that? Like, how can they find you, and what do you have available?
Well, so we currently, our headquarters is based out of West Jordan, but we are looking into opening up more locations, hopefully throughout Utah, but also nationwide is really the goal. We do have an account with Give Butter. It's a donation place, kind of like GoFundMe, but it's actually better because 100% of the proceeds actually goes to the organization. So we do have our 501c3, and so that's been really helpful with getting the support that we need. But yeah, and we also have a Facebook page. That's Pretty Tough Ladies Resource Center, and then an Instagram, and people can kind of share and go through that, which when people share, that's where people find us. That's where people who are going through abuse find us and ask for help. So it's so important to share that we have resources and share that there are resources out there. And we do actually work very closely with DV shelters. If they need somewhere to live, somewhere to stay, there's help, there's ways out.
So there's shelters, and I've heard of these shelters before, you know, like, oh, you can go to these women's shelters. But you started this because you saw a gap. You saw there was more than just a shelter. Like, shelters are good. That's part of it, but there's so much more that women need in order to get out of this and thrive. What are some of the ways that you and your organization help support these women so that they can actually thrive after abuse?
Yeah, so we offer support groups. That's actually how I started this, was a support group for women, and that's one of our biggest things that I would always push everyone towards, is to focus on your mental health and focus on your inner healing. And so we offer support groups, and then we also offer employment services. So we help with resume building, career building, interview skills, job applications, you name it, all those fun things. And we help with clothing too, so business clothing, mostly business. We try to stick with business to kind of help them feel good about themselves, feel like they can really build a career and take care of themselves without depending on somebody else.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, there's a lot more that we would like to offer in the future, but right now that's
that's
what we offer.
That helps out so much. And so we'll make sure to put all of the links down below to learn more about Pretty Tough Ladies, to follow McKayla online. And if you want to help support her organization, we'll put the links down for, is it Better Butter? What is
Give Butter.
Give Butter.
I know, it's a funny name, but it's cute.
The links down below. In the meantime, what are your handles so everyone can follow you? And
okay, so on Instagram, it's Pretty Tough Ladies Salt Lake City, so SLC. And then on Facebook, it's Pretty Tough Ladies Resource Center. So it's a little different both ends, but that's because somebody already had a Pretty Tough Ladies on Instagram.
You got to work with it.
But yeah, and then we have our website, which is prettytoughladies.org, and you can contact us through there. But those would be our 3 best ways to reach us. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming on. We're so happy to support you. All right, well, that's a wrap for the episode of The Brave Talk Show. If you're watching us on YouTube, there are more episodes that you will love on that window to your right, and we will see you on the other side.
I have some questions for you.